Good afternoon to you. 5:06 now, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we are making sense of the news. You can join us today, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. The big news today, Hunter Biden indicted on 3 gun charges. The man lied on a gun background check form about his drug use, and now he's busted. Or is he? Again, you can join the program, 888-630-9625. Let's see. Mike in Gainesville has been waiting very patiently. He's on line 3. Mike, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, Vince.
Hey, sir. Go ahead.
Yeah, patiently and ready to go. Biden should see that the walls are sort of closing in on him.
Yes.
You would think he has probably quietly behind the scenes signed pardons for all his family members and has just not told anybody as yet. I know that would be sort of breaking the standards, but they don't believe in the standards anymore. They're breaking all the rules. This is what going for broke means.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah.
So one way or the other, you and I agree here that Biden is going to pardon Hunter. They may very well have all the documents already drawn up. It's just a matter of timing, isn't it, Mike?
Yeah, well, I mean, he doesn't know when he's going to get 25th Amendment, and he doesn't know when he's going to wake up in the morning. So I don't think he would wait until the last second to finally sign the document. I think it's probably been signed already and stamped.
Right.
It's just in a drawer somewhere.
Yeah. Given his advanced age, this would be like a last will and testament. You kind of want to have that all figured out ahead of time, just in case you're not able to actually do it.
Exactly. Yeah.
No, it's a good point, Mike. Thank you. I really appreciate it. And I agree with Mike here that this is a pardon. It's gonna happen at some point, and which leads me to believe that there is something afoot that may not be entirely in the control of people who support Biden. Now, nothing is really quite in Biden's control, we know. But at least Biden world, the string pullers, whether it's Obama or Jill, I don't know exactly. But this is one of those stories where you feel like the signal is screeching out to you somewhere inside the noise, and you just have to get a hold of it. You just have to get a hold of what's really going on. Because remember, there's a lot of things going on here. One is that the White House has already claimed that there is no chance that Biden is going to pardon his son. This is what Corinne said on July 27th.
Okay, we go back to the first question of the briefing. I know you said not a lot's changed since yesterday and that it's a personal matter, but from a presidential perspective, is there any possibility that the president would end up pardoning his son?
No, she said flatly. Now, Corinne has been known to lie, and of course, in this case, it seems pretty obvious that one is a lie. But you think here that Biden is going to do this at some point, and if he's not going to be the nominee, what's the downside? What's the downside of the pardon? In fact, the pardon may be part of the effort to usher him out. Okay, just pardon him, pardon yourself to try and avoid any sort of federal charges, and get out of office. We'll replace you. And the appetite on the left for that, well, that's definitely growing. That is growing big time. And I began kind of sensing some of this a couple weeks ago when Chuck Todd began raising the question on the air on his program, Meet the Press, that it looks like Biden may be, it potentially would, like essentially, would it surprise you if Joe Biden quit before the end of the year? Do you remember this? Chuck Todd had asked Franklin Foer, the biographer, on his own program, whether or not he'd be surprised if Biden were to leave before the end of the year. And the guy said, no, I really wouldn't be that surprised. I really wouldn't be that surprised. Well, that's interesting. Where did that question come from? Why would Chuck Todd ask that specifically? Not clear. But David Ignatius this week wrote a column for the Washington Post. And in that column, he is calling now for Biden to step down. Ignatius, one of the longtime columnists for the Washington Post, said that he's straight up, he admitted this week that he straight up thinks it's time for a replacement and that he realizes time is running out. He says that you have Democrats all over the place who've been expressing this view behind closed doors, and now it's time to admit this. To say this in public. He said, I need to be the one who just goes first. If nobody else is going to say it, I need to say it because this is the actual conversation that's taking place. Isn't that kind of fascinating? He was on MSNBC. He was chatting with Andrea Mitchell. And he said that this was not an easy column to write. He says he admires many of the things that Biden has done in domestic policy and in foreign policy. He said he came to feel over the summer that the basic goal he had set for himself when he ran for president in 2019 of stopping Trump was at risk and that this needed to be discussed. So you see, the animating principle here is not really about any specific thing about Biden other than like, oh, man, if the voters are going to go for Trump, that could be a bad thing. That could be a really bad thing. Listen to a little bit of this conversation. Andrea Mitchell, David Ignatius this week on MSNBC.
David Ignatius joins me now. David, how are the phone calls this morning?
So, Andrea, basically what I tried to say this morning is just what you summarized in your introduction. This was not an easy column to write. I do admire many of the things that President Biden has done in domestic policy and in his foreign policy. I did come to feel over the summer that the basic goal he had set himself when he ran for president in 2019 of stopping Donald Trump was at risk, and that this needed to be discussed. I haven't been anywhere in conversations with Democrats, people who follow politics, where this has not been an issue that's been something that absorbs people, fills whole dinner conversations, but it hasn't been discussed in public. And I thought it was appropriate that that discussion begin.
Okay, but listen, understand who David Ignatius is. David Ignatius is an elite Democrat running around in elite Democrat circles, power brokers in that party, making decisions about how that party is governed and what kind of liberties they're going to rob from you, right? And he says that these are dinner table conversations that are happening behind closed doors in trusted company, the kind of people who wouldn't normally say this anywhere near in public because of the fascistic hold that the left has on the messaging. And Ignatius is saying, somebody's got to go first. I'm going to go first. And I'm even going to relay to you that this is happening behind the doors everywhere, that all these top Democrats are saying, we've got to get rid of Joe. Well, what does that look like? How would you get rid of Joe? If Joe was unwilling or if Jill was unwilling, how would you manifest that? Well, it could be any number of ways. I don't know if David Weiss is involved. It very well could involve him. But you start to throw out there all of the, the criticisms, all of the, oh, boy, he does look old. Oh, boy, did you notice that Joe Biden lies? Have you noticed that he's a big liar? You want an example of this? Today, CNN, of all places, CNN ran an entire segment about how Joe Biden does nothing but lie all the time. Now, again, it's hard to instantly, change direction when they're moving at 1,000,000 miles an hour in the direction of Biden's PR team. But listen to this. When was the last time you heard a segment that sounded like this on CNN?
And he has done, I don't know if it's similar things, but he's sort of told some stories that don't line up quite like this before.
Yeah, this president has a pattern at this point of either inventing or embellishing stories about his own past, his biography. He did it 3 times in one speech last month.
By the way, if it's a pattern, you would have been covering it throughout the emergence of the pattern, not just at the tail end of 6,000 lies.
Alone, he claimed he had witnessed a bridge collapse in Pittsburgh when he actually showed up about 6 hours later. He claimed that his grandfather had died just days before he was born himself at the same hospital. In fact, his grandpa died more than a year before in a different state, not the same hospital. And he also repeated a favorite false story that I and others have debunked over and over again about a supposed conversation with an Amtrak train conductor he was friends with, who was actually deceased at the time the conversation would have had to take place. And that's not all. There are some more serious ones in my view. Previously in his presidency, he claimed at one point he'd been arrested during a civil rights protest when, in other versions of the story, he just said an officer had taken him home from a protest. He said he had visited the Pittsburgh synagogue where worshippers were killed in a 2018 mass shooting. In fact, he had actually spoken to the rabbi, but never went. And he's made a whole bunch of others, too. He said at one point, Republicans like to bring this up, he said that he used to drive a tractor trailer, he used to drive an 18-wheeler. Never happened. The White House later clarified he used to drive a school bus at one point as a job briefly.
I don't even believe that. He drove a school bus? That sounds remarkably like a Kamala Harris story.
Bus, of course, not an 18-wheeler. So whatever his intentions, whether it's, foggy memory about stuff that's going on decades ago,
generous,
or deliberate embellishment, this is an unfortunate pattern that keeps coming up again and again with Joe Biden.
Even the phrase deliberate embellishment is generous. It is like the glossing over the blatant lies that Biden has told time and time and time again. And that was only a small percentage of the available lies from which they could have drawn. But that composed, what was that, a minute and a half segment on CNN today. Baby steps. A minute and a half of them just laying out, well, Biden does lie a lot. Like a lot. In fact, while we're on the subject of Biden's lies, you know that Biden has routinely, of course, lied about his son's business dealings. That has been a big one. And as the media runs around and says, there's no evidence, there's no evidence. He's lying constantly about his son's business dealings. And an interesting clip is getting around Twitter today. It's from an interview on NPR in 2019. And during this 2019 NPR interview, first of all, you're going to notice as you hear Biden speak that he was not quite as senile in 2019. That is now 4 years ago. Can you believe that? 4 years ago. And during the interview, the host points out that there were various officials who had warned Biden during the Obama administration that his son's business interests in Ukraine were a massive problem. And you'll hear Biden here say, that's not true. Nobody warned me. Nobody warned me. Now, this is a lie you're about to hear. This is Joe Biden, 2019.
Former White House aides of yours who tried to warn you about the potential conflicts of interest.
Nobody warned me about a potential conflict of interest. Nobody warned me about that. And at the same time,
George Kent, the State Department official, testified that he raised it to you.
No,
and
he
your
didn't
staff,
say
to your
me.
staff.
He did not.
To your staff. I stand
never,
corrected.
Never heard that once.
To your staff, and your staff told him he has no bandwidth.
Well, my son was dying. I guess that's why he said it.
Oh, boy.
Because my son was on his deathbed.
My son was dying. I didn't have time to think about my corruption. That's the answer to that question. So she points out correctly that George Kent, a State Department officer who was stationed in Kiev at the time, warned senior White House officials in 2015 about Hunter Biden's activities and the Biden family's activities and said this is a massive problem. He warned the vice president's staff about this. The claim at the time was that Biden didn't have, quote, the bandwidth to address the concerns because Beau was undergoing cancer treatment, according to people who spoke to the New York Times. This is in 2019, this report came out. But here's why Biden was lying. In addition to, apparently, he must have gotten the... Well, I'll leave it apart. I'll leave the Beau Biden thing aside. I think he got that detail right. He said his son was dying, so I guess he was undergoing cancer treatment at the time. So that squares. But there's this other piece. Biden was told directly, according to a September 30th, 2020 Wall Street Journal report. I went back and read it today. Headline: Hunter Biden's Ukraine war raised concerns with Obama officials. GOP-led probe confirms. And they quote a guy called Amos Hochstein. In addition to Mr. Kent, the Senate committees found that Amos Hochstein, a U.S. Special Envoy for International Energy Affairs, raised concerns directly with Joe Biden about his son serving on the Burisma board. Mr. Hochstein testified that he informed the vice president in October of 2015 that media outlets tied to Russia were highlighting Hunter's position to undermine his anti-corruption efforts in Ukraine. In other words, somebody did directly raise these concerns with Joe. So Joe lied in that interview in 2019 to the NPR lady. Yet again. But you're beginning to see the pieces coming together, aren't you? Of the end of the Biden presidency? Of showing him the door? It's gotten to the point that even the most public of the top officials in the Democrat Party, Nancy Pelosi, are now answering questions about the future of the White House in very squirrely ways. It's super interesting. Nancy Pelosi's remarks coming up. It is 5:21 now. Ignatius of the Washington Post calling for Joe Biden to get out of the way. Somebody else needs to run. It's time. Go, old man. You're going to get Trump elected again. And the evidence for that is definitely growing. First of all, Trump has the big lead in the primary right now. Additionally, in head-to-head matchups, in polling, guess who's winning? Trump versus Biden. Take a guess. Trump. Trump is now winning in the Real Clear Politics average by half a point, 0.4%. Now, you may think that doesn't sound like a big lead, but if that's the case in the popular vote, what does that look like in the Electoral College? It's just, this is freaking Democrats out. They are freaking this morning. In fact, I've got reports here. Democrats fear the increasing likeliness of a Trump victory. CNN has a story today from a guy called Edward Isaac Dovere. He says there's a clear feeling of meh about Biden among voters. Meh is the feeling. Not that good. The prospect of what a Trump or other MAGA Republican win would mean is terrifying to the Biden camp, as is the sense the election will be close, he writes. Notice it's not as terrifying to voters. It's terrifying to the Biden camp, but then voters, when they're surveyed, they're like, I could go with Trump. I like Trump. Trump's beating Biden in these head-to-head matchups. The headline on the piece is Biden campaign plots long game strategy as Democrats' fears of a Trump win spike. Several Biden aides themselves tell CNN that looking at Trump's wide lead in every primary poll and no clear leader in a hypothetical Biden-Trump rematch, it's actually Trump now who's ahead, leaves them with a particular kind of existential stress. Yes. Do you remember that picture of the Obama White House after Trump won? Do you remember that? When they were all standing out in the Rose Garden and they all had dour looks on their faces? Everybody. Valerie Jarrett and Jen Psaki. Everybody. They were all so sad. They all looked like Muppets with the upside down U mouths. They were all just standing there so angry and upset. That's kind of what I hope happens again. How could you not at this point, given all the abuse they've meted out to us? The least they deserve is a sad day. My guy lost. But they're freaking out. They're having existential stress, says CNN reports. Here, the former president may seem like the easier Republican candidate to beat, they claim, as a known quantity who is toxic to many voters. But they're terrified that if he is the nominee, any fumbles by the campaign or the president himself would enable the return of a candidate they see as a singular threat to American democracy. That's not what they say. They see him as a threat to their power. That's what they see. When they say democracy, they mean Democrats. That's what they mean. Even as some prominent party leaders privately wonder if Biden should pull out of running, aides to the president point the blame in part at the media for what they view as validating concerns about Biden's age and about Republican claims of Hunter Biden's corruption by covering those concerns, despite what they argue is a lack of evidence. Yes, that's the problem. The media is just not on Biden's side. If that's actually the case, that's a late-breaking development, and I can assure you it's because they're on the side of Democrats. That's what's really happening. Nancy Pelosi's remarks are very intriguing, what she just told CNN. We'll share those with you coming up. Also, we've got this new report out of Loudoun County on the sex assaults they covered up in the schools. Some of the details ahead. Good afternoon to you. 537 here in News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. You can join us, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. So David Ignatius in the Washington Post this week says, get rid of Biden. And one of the reasons, and he even floats the idea that maybe he can get a new running mate, but that's going to create all sorts of complications. But he obviously says that as unpopular as Biden is, and as desperate as voters are for him to not be in office anymore, Kamala Harris is worse. Kamala Harris is worse. Nobody likes her. Nobody approves of her. They all think she's terrible because they've seen her on television. And they've seen the projects that she supposedly is in charge of. They've all been unmitigated disasters. The border, anyone? So, is Kamala Harris the best running mate for Joe Biden? Nancy Pelosi was asked about this last night by CNN's Anderson Cooper. Listen to her evasive answer.
Is Vice President Kamala Harris the best running mate for this president?
He thinks so, and that's what matters.
I mean, he thinks so. What kind of answer is that? That is obviously not a full-throated endorsement of Kamala Harris. That's, well, Biden thinks so. Let's, whatever, whatever he wants. That's fine. Amazing. That obviously means that she doesn't think Kamala Harris is right for the job. Obviously. Nancy Pelosi, as cutthroat as she is. So Anderson Cooper does circle back here, and he says, but do you think that she's the best running mate? Listen to her deny Kamala 3 times.
But do you think she is the best running mate, though?
She's the vice president of the United States. So when people say to me, well, why isn't she doing this or that? I said, because she's the vice president. That's the job description. You don't do that much. You're a source of strength, inspiration, intellectual resource, and the rest. I think she's represented our country very well at home and abroad.
So throughout this, Nancy Pelosi 3 times was asked by Anderson Cooper, do you support her? Do you think she should be the running mate? Do you think she should be the running mate? Over and over and over again, she refused to say that, yes, she should be the running mate. And I love the backhanded compliment. Oh, she's great. She's the vice president. You don't do anything. What kind of answer is that? You don't do anything. I mean, it's true. The vice president doesn't do anything unless you're Dick Cheney. Everyone else doesn't do anything. But Kamala Harris is useless, as Nancy Pelosi. Speaking of useless Kamala Harris, here she is today at Hampton University.
You all, as I said earlier, have coined the phrase climate anxiety to describe what is associated with that existential crisis.
A bunch of people talking about their mental illness together.
And so there are a number of things that we have done that I'm proud of since we came in office, including putting $1 trillion into a number of things that are about adaptation and resilience and what we need to do to build a clean energy economy.
Do you think she even knows what she's talking about when she uses these words? Like, if you asked her for a sentence of detail, what does adaptation mean? Speak slowly. Would she be able to tell you? Is there an answer to that question? Man. All right, back to Nancy Pelosi clips, because I know you can't get enough of them. Here she is through her dentures explaining the importance of this election.
Now, you've heard me say before, this is the most important election of our time. We all say that each time, because it is, and it just keeps to be more so.
We're so used to lying that we say it all the time.
But I'm writing a book now, and I'm thinking about calling it.
She's not writing a book. I can tell you right now this is a lie. There's no way Nancy Pelosi is spending any time writing a book. Someone else is writing a book, and Nancy Pelosi's name will appear on it.
And our flag is still there. And why I say that is being born and raised in Baltimore, where the national anthem was written.
How's Baltimore doing these days?
People cheer at the end of the national anthem, but I cheer when it says, proof through the night that our flag was still there. We have to prove through the night that we're in uncertainty of this election, that our flag is still there.
What flag would that be? Which flag are you talking about? Is it the same one Francis Scott Key was referring to? Or is it something completely different? I've noticed that Democrats these days, they do a lot of performative gestures for flags that aren't the American flag. Wasn't Nancy Pelosi wearing a Ukrainian flag at one point? Has she taken a knee for the Black Lives Matter flag? Yeah, I think I've seen variations on this. Which flag brings a tear to her eye? Does she have emotions? I'd like to see it, regardless of the flag. Pelosi. And then there's this one. I didn't see this until our buddy Chris Plant shared it. It's so good. It is honestly so good. She tries to accuse Donald Trump of being so bad. This reminds me of when Joe Biden said that Georgia, by changing its election laws to make them more secure, it's like they're making Jim Crow into Jim Eagle, he says. It's like nonsensical. Nancy Pelosi said last night that Trump is so bad that he's turning our country into not just a banana republic, but a republic. What? What does that mean? We're a constitutional republic. What are you talking about?
What did you just say? He was going to indict all of his political opponents?
He told a rally that he would tell his attorney general to indict his political opponents. I mean, that's a banana republic without the banana. I mean, it's a terrible thing. It's a terrible thing.
Quick logic test. What is a banana republic without the banana? think the answer is a republic. I think if you can keep it, a banana republic without the banana. And also, I love that Anderson Cooper and Nancy Pelosi are sitting there going, who in the world would ever indict their political opponent? What kind of monster would indict their political opponent? Well, there's one that's not that far away. He's at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, or if he's not there, he's in Delaware. It's Joe Biden, the guy who's indicting his political opponent as we speak. What are you talking about? And that's an actual banana republic with a banana. So that's Nancy Pelosi today, last night, just ridiculous. But you can feel, don't you sense it, that the writing's on the wall for these people, that they're going to yank Biden, they're going to give him the big hook, they're going to pull Biden and Kamala off stage and replace them entirely. Let's go to Mark in Chantilly now, line 2. Mark, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, Vince. Thanks for taking my call.
Yes, sir.
So for a couple of weeks, I've already figured they're going to pull him out because they've started embracing the term Bidenomics. One of the biggest failures they have that they can point to is the economy, the inflation, all these pocketbook issues,
yes,
and all the money people do not have anymore.
Right.
So they're going to say, well, no, it's not me. That's Bidenomics. Biden did that. I'm the new replacement, and I think the timing's critical. They're not going to do it this year. They're going to do it when it's too late to do a primary. They don't want people to have a voice into who's going to be the next Democrat nominee. No. That democracy thing is hard for Democrats.
Totally. That's exactly right. This has been my theory of this, too, which is that the last thing they want is for Democrat primary voters to think that they can contribute to this. Like, just keep your mouth shut. We're keeping you out of this.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Not that. They just have to spend money, too, and have that bloodletting in public in front of everybody and see the hits on who they eventually throw up to run against, who I hope is Trump.
Yeah, for sure.
But
Yeah, they realize the liability they have on their hands here. I mean, Biden is a stinker, no question. And this is why this is one of the reasons why I was asking earlier this week whether or not there's a chance here that Democrats begin throwing some bodies out that help make the case for impeachment. Even if they don't do it publicly behind closed doors, right? Like kind of quietly releasing some of the evidence here against Biden just to add to the mountain we already have. Will there be Democrat saboteurs in his midst because they see impeachment as a useful vehicle to get rid of this guy? Anything can happen here, Mark. And you're right. Bidenomics, it's just him owning Bidenomics is like, I mean, that's got to be a way to destroy this guy. Like, who's looking around going, man, the economy's been great for me?
Right. I don't think they'll impeach him because that goes with too much blood against their side. They'll have him walk away like Nixon, or they'll 25 him saying he's medically unqualified, so they can come up and say, we did the right thing, he walked away. If they impeach and they go with that, that's infighting in the Democrats. They don't do that.
This is why, what I'm talking about, though, is that they kind of quietly start getting some of this evidence out there. Leak it to the New York Times, leak it to the Washington Post. Don't put any fingerprints on this thing and drag the man down and out of the White House. So, I mean, we'll see what happens.
Absolutely fair.
Yeah.
Absolutely fair. So Republicans have to sit there and not tie the failures to just Biden. It's Biden and the Democrats. It's Biden and whoever they'll put up. Because if you keep just hitting Biden, we removed that problem.
Yes.
Here's our good new Democrat.
Totally.
Be careful.
They all have to wear it. You're totally right, Mark. Thank you very much. All smart points. Let's see here. Sean coming in from Columbia, Maryland today, line 3. Sean, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, Vince, how you doing? Thanks for taking my call.
Yes, sir.
Hey, I was always under the assumption that Trump wasn't going to be in jail for like 2,000 years, and why aren't they confident with all these pending cases? Where are the Democrats at? I mean, or are they afraid that we have real evidence against Joe Biden and he's going to end up in jail?
Right.
And one last thing. Go ahead.
No, but just on this point, so your view is that Democrats thought that they'd have Trump locked up by now, or in the near term they'll have him locked up, so that should have the whole thing in the bag. But you're detecting a nervousness from them right now that suggests that they don't have the rigging of this election fully figured out.
Absolutely. I think that they're scared to death. And not only that, Vince, David needs to put in his article, it's his policies. It's not his age. We've dealt with his age for the last 3 years, and it's never been a problem.
Yes.
And it's the policies that are sinking this country. I work in an office full of Democrats, and most of them are minorities, and they've had enough with Biden. So, I mean, at a quick snapshot, there's probably 35 in my office that have said they can't vote for this guy again.
Right, but when you say they've had enough of Biden, you just made the point, though, that it's really fundamentally, it's not just about the daffy old man in the White House, it's about the policies. Do they associate the policies with him, or is it just about his old age?
Absolutely. A lot of them are against the trans movement in the schools. They want to be left alone, and they're seeing a real impingement on their rights, and they're dumbfounded. I'm like, you guys haven't seen this in the last 30, 40 years? This is what's been happening. It's been a slow crawl.
Yeah.
And I think that they've finally woken up and said, nah, man, not going to have it.
Yeah, no, good points. All right, Sean, thank you very much for the call. Let me check in here with Al calling in from Waldorf on line 4. Al, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hi, Vince. Great show as always. I want to throw out a name that I don't hear anybody talking about. You're right. Biden is a disaster, and the Democrats know it. But I think they don't have any choice but to stick with him. I think what they'll do is they'll get rid of Harris, and they'll put in Stacey Abrams. The Democrats love Stacey Abrams. It'll give them a reason to vote for the ticket. And all those people who might have stayed home and not voted for Biden, they'll vote for a Biden.
Yeah. And this takes care of the problem that they all are talking about pretty openly, because to them, it's all identity politics. They're saying, well, if we get rid of a woman, the women are going to hate us. And if we get rid of a black person, the black people are going to hate us. We can't do that unless you bring in a black woman. That kind of solves the problem, to your point. And here's the upside, Al, with Stacey Abrams. She's got executive experience. She's been the governor of a major state.
That's right. That's right. She'll have to resign as governor of Georgia, but I think she'll get over that.
Al, thank you very much. It's a good idea. Although we, of course, know that Stacey Abrams would be just as much of a disaster as Kamala Harris. Hold on. We've got a lot more to get to, including I want to take a look at some of the findings of this Loudoun County schools report. We'll keep focusing on this week as well. Okay, on tomorrow's program, we're going to do a deeper dive into this report just released today by Loudoun County Schools, forced to by a judge, finally making an internal review of all of the sexual assaults in the schools and how the school system handled it public. Judge ruling today that it be made public, and of course now we have it. That first sexual assault took place at Stonebridge High School, May 28th of 2021. That was the daughter of Scott Smith. We've talked to him so many times. He was in the news this week as he was issued a pardon for, what was it, disorderly conduct or something. His life was being turned upside down by a Soros-funded prosecutor here in Loudoun County. That's over now, thanks to Governor Youngkin, who's issued a pardon for him. The report here says that the school delayed its Title IX complaint investigation after that incident, which of course led to the boy assaulting another girl at Broad Run High School. They didn't conduct a threat assessment of the kid after the first assault, the boy. So, of course, he went on to attack again. And there are apparently, according to Ian Pryor, who's been digging through this, they've got well over 150 Title IX incidents. 150 Title IX incidents that they didn't launch investigations into. 159 specifically, Title IX reports to Loudoun County Public Schools in the first half of 2021 and 2022. None of them were investigated. Remember, Loudoun County Schools was trying to advance this let the boys into the girls' room policy because, life is demented these days. And they tried to cover up the role that this student played in a sexual assault in their bathrooms. According to the report, the boy identified as, quote, pansexual, telling people that he was pansexual. He would routinely wear skirts and kilts to school. He would wear fishnet gloves. And in the report, the people that were a part of it, the school workers who were a part of it, they said that there was nothing unusual about that, a boy showing up in a skirt. In fact, he was one of the more subdued, dressed students at the school, which tells me that, okay, wait a second. There's a lot more weird stuff going on at this school. All the guys were wearing skirts, and he didn't really stand out. He was just one among many. There are more questions than answers produced by this report, and we'll try and get you some answers as we dig into it even deeper tomorrow on the Vince Coglianese Show. Coming up next, the great one, Mark Levin.
New